The offensive line is getting more athletic, and that can lead to some great things. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message, no ads or anything like that. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Is Cade Otton the overlooked player in the Bucs offense? And Tykee Smith appears to be in the driver's seat in a key position battle. That's all coming up in a little bit, but let's start with some comments from running back Rachaad White and how he sees things changing compared to last year. Rachaad is no doubt the running back one for this team, and he went through some serious problems last year with the offensive line not being, to be fair, the most efficient. That caused some issues for him in the run game, but despite all that, he still nearly ran for 1,000 yards. This year, however, he's excited about what the offensive line is becoming and what they could be for the Bucs moving forward. More notably, how much more athletic the unit is as a whole. When speaking to the media, Rachaad was asked about the improvements along the line, and he said, quote, "That's huge. It's huge, man. We've got some big O-linemen that took care of themselves. They all gained weight, but all were still able to move and get out in space, and that's the biggest thing. I think they all have that attitude, and they're very nasty. So, yeah, just to be able to, as a running back, get outside and get out in space with them in front of you. Like you said, when I had a couple of screens last year, it was just like daylight. You could see daylight and you just take it. I think on one of the screens, Cody was right next to me for a minute, so it was crazy to see, but it's amazing," end quote. The screen game and the swing passes were a huge part of Rachaad's game last season, considering he finished as the team's third leading receiver with 549 yards. A big reason for that success wasn't just his ability to create plays in space, but it was having some of his offensive linemen clear the runway for him and set up some lead blocks to spring him loose. Now they're looking to do that even more while also improving the blocking schemes in order to open things up for him as a runner. They've gotten bigger, they've gotten stronger, they've gotten more athletic. It's all about creating those inside running lanes that just flat out did not exist last year. And this is a point that we have hammered over and over again, but there's a reason for that. And it's because the offensive line improving over last season is the difference between the Buccaneers repeating as division champs or missing the playoffs. They got away with some bad offensive line play last year, and credit to Canales. He was able to find the right combination of plays down the stretch for this team to have success. Credit to the players for being able to make things work and really play into their strengths, but that only works for so long. Then you run into a team like the Detroit Lions who just shut you down because they can simply overpower you. And there's plenty of teams on the schedule that can do that. If you take a look at where they are compared to where the Bucs were last year, Detroit, the Niners, Philly, Baltimore, Dallas, Kansas City, there are some tough defenses on this schedule for this offensive line, and that O-line has to outperform them in order for the Bucs to reach at least the level of success that they did last year. Another area that's going to help is having reliable players come in to give Rachaad a breather. Talked a lot about the role that Bucky Irving has the opportunity to play this season and how he can help take the offense to a new level by taking some of the pressure and responsibility off of Rachaad's shoulders. Rachaad also talked about that, telling the media, quote, "It would help out a lot. I wouldn't say that it's not. I'll be out there sometimes where I feel like I'm dragging. But for sure, to have them back there, Chase and Bucky, and for them to be able to spare me, of course, is key." When you set goals and you have the stats that you want to have, and when you want to get in the conversations that, because I peep everything, when you want to get into the conversations of being one of the best running backs in the league, it's going to come with like 300 touches, though, at the end of the day. You just brace your body as much as possible, but you for sure have to have guys behind you that rally behind you and are able to spell you in key moments, end quote. I was on ESPN Southwest Louisiana on Monday, and one of the players that they asked me about was Bucky Irving and what he brought to the team. And I said the same thing that I've been saying on here. He can do all the things that Rachaad can do when he's in the game. So the Bucs still have a wide open playbook. There's no limitations. There's no special packages or formations. The Bucs can run or pass the same way with any of these running backs in the game. It's about consistency. It's about having a player that you can rely on to make those plays when he's in the game. Chase Edmonds last year had 13 more rushing yards than Baker Mayfield, but he had the same yards per carry as Rachaad. Sean Tucker was a non-factor. Rachaad White accounted for 75.5% of carries by the running back position last season. That has to come down. Without question, that percentage has to drop. It needs to be more in the 55 to 60% range, not 75.5%. And that doesn't mean that Rachaad's carries have to go down. I'm sure the Bucs don't want him carrying the ball 272 times again, but he can still be well over 200. What it means is that the running game has to be more efficient, and the other players that see the field have to actually be successful in their opportunities so that they keep getting the ball. Just to throw out some numbers, if Rachaad has 225 carries, Bucky has 125, and Chase has 50. Rachaad only accounts for a little over 56% of the running back carries, which is right where you want him. You still want those 70 to 80 receptions, and that gets you to the 300 total touch mark, but give him that help in the run game so he stays fresh late in the year and stays healthy, which brings this full circle back to the offensive line. Those guys, Graham Barton, Cody Mauch, Ben Bredesen especially, they have to get the job done and clear those running lanes. Otherwise, we're talking about another year where the Bucs are at the bottom of the league in rushing, and you're not going to make a deep playoff run if you can't run the ball. Are we forgetting about Cade Otton? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But with the playoffs having wound down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Right now, the Dodgers are the favorites to win the World Series at plus 320, while the Tampa Bay Rays are struggling and sitting at plus 29,000. If you'd rather get in on some NFL odds early on, the Chiefs and Niners are tied atop the Super Bowl odds at plus 600, while the Bucs have somehow dropped to plus 6,500 while being plus 310 to win the NFC South. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I will be joined, hopefully, by Evan Klosky. We'll continue to get his thoughts as training camp continues to ramp up, and we'll talk a little bit about what he wants to see in this weekend's game against the Cincinnati Bengals. In the meantime, if you want to hear the latest news from around all sports, but you want to hear more than just national narratives, and you want the biggest stories without fake scripted screaming at one another, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today streams 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is a Cade Otton podcast. You longtime everydayers know that Cade Otton is my dude, and he came on strong last year for the Bucs. So it's worth asking, are we forgetting about Cade Otton? There's been a lot of talk, not just on this show, but throughout all Bucs coverage about Mike Evans, as there should be, the potential of Chris Godwin this year, whether that's because of his return to being a primarily slot receiver, the Liam Cohen offense, that Godwin is finally healthy, etc. Lots of talk about Rachaad White, lots and lots of hype and excitement around Jalen McMillan. Then you have the reuniting of Baker and Sterling Shepard, and we talk about all these weapons and get excited about what some of the rookies can do. Then we realize that Cade Otton hasn't really been talked about at all. I mean, go back to last year. He had the fourth most receiving yards, the fourth most receptions, the fifth most targets, and the second most receiving touchdowns on the team. That seems like a guy worth talking about, right? 47% of his receptions in 2023 resulted in a first down. He was a reliable safety net for Baker Mayfield to move the sticks. He was the guy trusted in the closing seconds of a game against the Atlanta Falcons to finish the job and get the win. So what can we expect from him this season? This is where things get a little difficult. Think back to 2020 and 2021 when the Bucs had Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Gronk, Fournette, Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson was a dude there for a New York minute, Rojo, but there was only one ball to go around. Now, of course, the 2024 Bucs aren't quite stacked to that level, but there's a lot of talented skill position players on the offense, and there's still only one football. So I think we're in a situation where Otton is going to be the third or fourth option on any given play. There's going to be plays drawn up to get him the ball. Again, likely on a lot of third downs inside the red zone or the 10 zone for those of you new to the podcast, when it's kind of those goal-to-goal situations or the Bucs are inside the 10-yard line. I refer to that as the 10 zone. But Godwin is the primary move the sticks guy. Evans is the primary everything guy. McMillan, we aren't sure yet, but the arrow seems to be pointing to him being a big part of the offense as a guy that can go deep, can go over the middle. He can make contested catches. He's a refined route runner. His route tree is absolutely outstanding. And then Shepard is someone that Baker trusts implicitly. So if he's in trouble, he may look to Shepard quite a few times. Then, of course, the safety nets of Rachaad or Bucky Irving out of the backfield. Otton is looking at another year where he's likely going to have fewer than 70 targets and may even come up shy of 60, but he's going to catch about 70 to 75% of those targets. The key is, what situations will those targets come in? It's not going to be a first down, let's target Otton up the seam kind of thing. He's not Gronk. He's not Kelsey. He's not the tight end where the Bucs and Liam Cohen are going to try to force feed him the ball early and often to set the tone of how the game is going to go. Instead, they're going to trust him. They're going to look to him on those third downs in the red zone, because while he's not one of those elite guys, he's not Kelsey, he's not Laporta or Hawkinson, what he is reliable. The Bucs know on those third downs, in the end zone, in the red zone, late in games, Otton is going to be there and he's going to make a play because that's what he's done since he joined the team. I'm going to do my best to track when Otton is getting targets and how often each game those targets are coming, when it's third down in a passing situation. Baker looks to Otton to move the sticks and extend drives. When Baker looks for him in the red zone, Baker had a 102.5 quarterback rating when targeting Otton in 2023. So I fully expect that relationship to continue to be there, but there's more mouths to feed this season, and Otton isn't the kind of guy that's going to throw a fit if he doesn't get the ball. He's just going to maximize the opportunities that he does get. You still have Payne Durham as a pass-catching tight end option. Kieft is going to get, a couple of targets here and there, but again, he's not a big target guy at tight end. He is a blocker primarily. He's a lead blocker on a lot of these running plays, especially to the outside. Then you have Devin Culp, who may or may not make the team. It's kind of a wait and see situation. Do the Bucs feel that they can get away with stashing Devin Culp on the practice squad and then call him up if needed? Or are they really going to carry 4 tight ends on the 53-man roster? I don't know if they're going to go quite that far. You have a lot of receivers that you're going to want to keep. You have a lot of players in the secondary that you're going to want to keep. You need a large edge rush rotation, just given the sheer fact that you don't have any A-list players there, and you're going to have to keep moving guys in and out to keep everybody fresh and try to maximize the sheer numbers game that you have there. So Cade Otton, while you don't want to see him on the field for 97% of offensive snaps again this year, he is going to garner the vast majority of tight end targets. Again, you may only see 75 total targets to the tight end position this year, given the additions at wide receiver, the addition to the running back room. But Cade Otton may end up with 60 to 65 of those 75 targets because he's gone out and he's shown in clutch situations, in key moments, to extend drives. He's a guy that is, I'm not going to say completely sure-handed. He doesn't have the hands of Chris Godwin or anything, but he's about as reliable of a tight end as you're going to get in those situations. So while Cade Otton, I don't recommend you draft him in any of your fantasy leagues, he's still going to be a key part of this offense. It's just the simple fact that key part of the offense is going to come in clutch situations. Tykee Smith is leading the way. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. So many of us put all of our focus and energy into making sure we're there to provide for other people and always put ourselves on the back burner, and that can lead to problems building up from being left there too long. That's why it's so important to treat your mental health with the same care and attention that you give to everyone else in your life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to fit around your busy schedule so that you don't have to leave yourself on the back burner anymore. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, no questions asked. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Wrapping things up here on a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and Tykee Smith may have left practice over the weekend with an injury, but it's not serious, and he's going to be back out on the field this week. One thing that is serious is his drive to win a position battle as a rookie, and he appears to be on his way to doing just that. Tykee has gotten a lot of snaps at nickel corner with the first team defense, and his football IQ and grasp of the defense are both well documented at this point. That said, Christian Iian and Tavierre Thomas are not backing down. ESPN recently dropped an article highlighting the biggest position battles for every team during training camp. And of course, Jenna Lane had the Bucs covered, saying, quote, with Ben Bredesen now virtually a lock at the left guard position with Sua Opeta's ACL injury, the focus shifts to the starting nickelback competition. Third-round draft pick Tykee Smith has been lining up with the first-team defense and by all accounts should be the starter. But Tavierre Thomas has had 3 interceptions in 6 practices, and they still have Christian Iian, the starter from last season, end quote. This was always going to be one of the most intense position battles, and it has fully become a 3-player race. Now, full disclosure, when I talked about the battle for slot corner, I always kind of mentioned Tavierre Thomas in passing, thinking he was more a depth guy than a true contender for the starting job. Obviously, I was wrong in that assessment because Tavierre Thomas has been playing out of his mind in these practices. I'm also not sure that the Bucs expected Tykee Smith to be this good this fast. Todd Bowles demands a lot, and I mean a lot, from his players in the secondary in this defensive scheme. And I think that Light and Bowles kind of expected Tykee Smith to come in and gradually learn the defense while being a rotational player through at least the first half of the season, maybe even his entire rookie season. Instead, he grasped his responsibilities right out of the gate, grasped the defensive scheme and the playbook, and then hit the ground running to win this competition. Christian Iian, of course, cannot be thrilled about this, but now he's going to push even harder to try to keep his starting job. That said, his playmaking abilities are also needed at safety, and Bowles might start to look at him as more of a wild card rather than a true nickel corner or a true safety, that he's more of a hybrid player that Bowles can utilize all over the field. We talked a lot during the offseason about Bowles mentioning who his chess pieces were. You know, he mentioned Zion McCollum. He mentioned Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. He mentioned, of course, Levante David as his chess pieces. I think Christian Iian can fall into that category based on his experience and his versatility at these different positions. His skill set lends itself to being able to be placed anywhere on the field and then do any number of tasks that he's asked to do. Drop into zone, man up on somebody, cover a running back out of the backfield, go one-on-one with a tight end, come in on a screaming blitz from the corner. Iian can do all those things, and his playmaking ability and his intelligence means that Todd Bowles, even if Iian doesn't win the starting nickel job, Todd Bowles is going to find a way to make sure that he gets on the field, because you want those kinds of guys out on the field as much as humanly possible. What's really also going to be interesting to see is who fills in for Jordan Whitehead over the course of the next few practices. Whitehead suffered an oblique strain and will miss a little bit of time. Again, not serious, but the Bucs aren't going to push the issue and force him to get out there too soon. They need Jordan Whitehead to be healthy on the back end of that defense. So, is Tykee going to be tested at safety now, or is Bowles going to move Iian back there while Tykee and Thomas battle it out at that nickel corner? Is it going to be Kayvon Merriweather, or you have an undrafted rookie in Rachaad Wisdom that has really shown out so far through training camp? Is he going to get the opportunity to line up next to Antoine Winfield Jr. and continue to show what he has to offer? There's a lot of different options there, and Todd Bowles is probably going to play with those pieces a little bit, knowing all the different playmakers now that he has in the secondary. It's definitely something to keep your eye on, but at this rate, the Bucs could end up with 3 starting rookies, possibly even 4. Really think about that for a minute. Depending on whether or not you want to call wide receiver 3 a starting position, I think you probably should, because most teams start with 3 wide receivers on the field. Nickel corner is starting to garner some attention as being considered a starting position. Well, you're not going to have a starting nickel if you don't have 3 wide receivers on the field. But depending on whether or not you want to call that a starter, you could have Jalen McMillan, Graham Barton, possibly Tykee Smith, and then depending on how things look at edge rusher come week 1, you could have Chris Braswell out there on the field as a starter. The Bucs' first 4 draft picks could all be starting in week 1 against the Washington Commanders in their home opener, which not only speaks to the level of talent of these rookies, not only speaks to their ability to pick up on these playbooks, understand their assignments and their responsibilities in these given schemes, but it also speaks to the depth that the team will now have because of it. When you have potentially as many as 4 rookies coming in and starting, unseating guys that were there last year as starters, that just adds more experience to your depth of the 53-man roster, but it also speaks to the outstanding job that Jason Light and his staff did in evaluating these players through the draft process, being patient during the draft, not panicking to trade up and give up future assets, give up other assets in that draft to go secure a guy. They let the draft fall to them, and they came away in the first 2 days of that draft with potentially 4 starters, plus you still had Bucky Irving leading off day 3, and we know he's going to be a big part of this team. So rookies are going to be incredibly important for the Buccaneers this season, and Tykee Smith is making it known that he is out for the starting job, and he is the leader in the clubhouse as of now to land that nickel job. That is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Make sure you are following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I should be joined by Evan Klosky to get his thoughts on the upcoming preseason game. And of course, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, or on your favorite podcast catcher of choice. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.